Warning, Australia could be next as house prices crash in London. This is a news article that I got sent overnight by a bunch of you. Obviously, I posted that the boom is over in Australia. Um, and obviously yesterday I talked about that immigration is increasing house prices. Some people loved it, some people agitated by it, but I've been asked to comment on this, so here I am. So this video is a little bit of a different one. So a dramatic slump in London house prices has led experts to warn a similar scenario could play out in Australia, with one economist calling the nation highly vulnerable to a crash. London has joined a growing list of global cities where house prices have declined from their pandemic-era peaks. This list includes Toronto, Hong Kong, Beijing, Miami, and Auckland, but Australian cities are conspicuously absent, because they're increasing. London's average real house price reached a record £910,000. So that's, in Australian dollars equivalent to $1.8 million in 2022, according to plumplot.co.uk. Since then, it has corrected by almost 30%. That's enormous, hitting £648,000 in 2025. That's a historic low, with similar levels not seen since 2009. 2009 was the GFC, for those who are wondering why they're referencing 2009. Reports of a correction have led some pundits to issue warnings about Australia's own market. So this next quote is from Macrobusiness chief economist Leith Van Ulselen. My view is that Australia is highly vulnerable to a future property crash due to its record low affordability and extreme housing valuations. Yep, low affordability and extreme housing valuations is definitely a fact because prices are going up. So the quote continues as Melbourne is less vulnerable given that its affordability has improved over recent years. However, rather than London, Canada's and New Zealand's price crashes are more relevant to Australia, given the similarities in our banking systems in the case of New Zealand and economies in the case of Canada. So here's another economist. This is a quote. His name's Steve Keen, the Australian economist who predicted the global financial crisis, argued that growth in new mortgage debt was the main driver of house prices. Yes, I agree. With credits free flowing, prices will go up, and that this dynamic has reached a tipping point in both the UK and Australia. The general trend is that household debt, having trebled relative to GDP for most nations over the last 30 years, is now plateauing or falling for most of those countries. Quote continues, this implies that house prices are likely to plateau or fall relative to consumer prices and certainly consumers' income from now on. And the quote continues, as household debt fell, Professor Keen believed house prices would stop rising, and at best, price stagnation is likely at a national level. So a property strategist from Metropole Property, Michael Yardney, says his quote is, I'm skeptical, cautioning that London property prices can fall for London-specific reasons, and that doesn't automatically translate into Australia next. Yep, I agree. London is a global city with many different buyers, policy settings and affordability ceilings. When conditions tighten, London often shows the strain earlier than many other markets because it's expensive, highly interest rate sensitive, and more exposed to policy and tax changes. He said unlikely Australia was to experience a property crash, which would require forced selling brought on by a sharp lift in unemployment, a deep recession, or a severe credit event. The quote continues, the nation's structural housing shortage acted as a powerful floor under prices, Mr. Yardney said. That undersupply means that when house prices soften, there is usually a pool of buyers waiting to re-enter once they perceive value. Yep, that's true. Other experts took to social media to draw similar comparisons in light of the figures from London. And so this is a property researcher, Cameron Kusha. I think some prices in Australia are likely to rise, but geez, prices in places like Queensland, Adelaide, Perth, and all these areas, he used a very funny term, is awfully frothy. How good is that? That's definitely a millennial. And he also goes on, if supply of new stock and or existing stock was to lift quickly, there's certainly reasons to expect price falls. Then someone else goes on with a fairly cryptic message. SQM founder Lewis Christopher gave a more cryptic warning. Never think large housing price falls can't happen to a large global city. It can and will. There you go. this article continues to go on as well. Talks about that the RBA are likely to increase rates. Yep, I do think that is the case as well. But PropTrack's house price growth is still indicating that Sydney's to rise by 6.4%, which is a bit lower. Melbourne at 4.5%. Brisbane at 14.6%, Perth at 17.2%, and Adelaide at 12.8%. Nationally, prices were at 8.8%, which is usually what we typically expect. So that was in 2025. Yeah. And yeah, he's then, a big key thing here is which I agree, he says that the higher mortgage rates in Australia was offset by lack of supply, which I agree. I agree there. So let me go through what I think here. So, if we look at the GFC, there was a couple of things driving this. There were some property prices that were increasing. Australia was pretty strong in terms of its credit position. Like when we talk about a credit event, we're pretty conservative anyway. Have we become more conservative? Yes, we have. But typically, a couple of things that are driven prices are free flowing credit. So if the banks and the regulators are continually trying to give money and are happy to give money out, property prices will go because of the supply of cash. And the reality is that we're under supply, and which is due to many reasons: population growth, immigration. We're also trying to further develop these major cities, which I don't know why we don't try and develop more regional cities, because we can spread the growth a little bit. Those are a couple of reasons. Like if we look at construction, we were to build 1.2 million properties by 2030. So that's 240,000 properties a year. We're currently building 175 to 185,000. We're 175,000 below target in the first 2 years. So there's a little bit of an increase, but geez, there's a lot of ground to make up. And look, I've seen in my comments, I saw multiple people say, but there's over 1 million properties untenanted at the moment. Whinge. All these rich people buying property, and they're just letting it sit there. Guys, you've not read enough. You've just done a Google search and looked at the AI thing. And even if you read that as well, it tells you that, according to the census and according to ABS, and obviously this is in 2021, right? Another census will be coming up soon. Those over $1 million and million properties are a number of factors. A lot of them are untenanted because they're on the market to be tenanted, or they're being renovated, or they're being constructed. Some of them are over 55s villages where some of them go empty for a little bit. There was many things, but the estimated number of true untenanted properties was 130 to 150,000 properties. So shut up. It's a small percentage. Those aren't the issues. So do I think we're going to have a similar event to London? No, I don't think we're going to have a similar event to London. We're a much more stable credit country. We're still giving out credit. I know there's been a lot of articles around and a lot of people freaking out around the trust and company lending piece. And by the way, that's not over. That is going to continue to be more difficult to access. And as it goes on, that kind of started happening around October last year. In 2025, fast forward to even just this week, another lender announcing that they're going to do something different. But fairly well, all the majors they're going to be doing them, but they're going to be reducing or changing the policy to limit people going multiple times, right? And so the regulators figured that out, that people can go multiple times. The banks had these policies. It was perfectly legal, but now it's just going to change. And the big reason for that was the numbers that the APRA are looking at. They're considering investors at high risk. So if we look at settlements per month, 40% are investors. 60% are only owner occupiers. 40% is a really, really big number. If we go back in 2020 or 2019, I think we're sitting at 25% were investors. That's a big jump in a very short period of time. So APRA feel more comfortable at that figure, being at 20-ish%. That's what they'd like it to see at. And when we look at bank books, like their actual books on how much of their book is investors and then how much of their book's owner-occupier, I think they're all sitting around 10%. So again, APRA want them sitting at around 20. It's not high risk, but in terms of the actual fiscal figure on investors settling, it's huge because there's just more lenders than there ever has been before. And there's been a lot of credit available. I don't think that credit is going to stop. So for that reason, I don't think property prices are going to drop. We are significantly behind on our supply of property, so I don't think that's going to drop. Do I think some areas will soften this year? Do I think credit will be more difficult? Credit will be more difficult, but it won't go away. Credit became more difficult in 2018, 2019, and all those areas, and property prices dropped, like, areas in Sydney. But once we hit pandemic period again, it increased. In addition to that, I think something like 85%, it is, as of late 2024 and early 2025, Australian mortgage holders remain in a strong position, with many estimated to be almost 4 years ahead on their repayments. So that's 4 years of repayments in redraw and in offset, and only 15% have small buffers and have gone behind on repayments marginally sometimes. So our delinquency rates are very low. During the pandemic, we were giving all this free money, which no one spent, by the way. They didn't need it, but a lot of mortgage holders are ahead. So in terms of Australia's position, we're very, very strong. I don't see a drop in property, but I do see a softening in some areas, but there are going to be other areas that surge. Hopefully this is helpful, guys. Bit of a longer video. Some of you might not care, might be boring for some of you, but hopefully I've added some value. But if you want to talk about investing or reach out, just DM me. We'll talk soon.